Here we are, Photoshop, ready to dive straight into the non-destructive workflow. So we're going to start off by creating a new empty group. We're going to call it RT for retouching. Inside that we're going to create a blank layer, also called RT, and it's from this that we're going to be doing the majority of the changes using the stamp clone tool and the healing brush. We're then going to create another blank group and call it DB. This is going to be our dodge and burn folder. And inside that we're going to create two adjustment layers. We're going to create a brightness and contrast adjustment layer and drag it inside our folder called DB, where we're going to turn the brightness all the way down and turn down the contrast as well. We're then going to drop that inside of the DB group and call it low. We can then go into our layer actions by clicking on the three little dots down there and duplicate this layer. We're going to rename it straight away and call it high. We're then going to pump up the brightness all the way to the top and also change our contrast slightly. We then need to make sure we invert both of the masks. To do that, we select the mask and then select our filters and click invert. We're then going to create another blank group and call it color and slide it all the way to the top, and inside we're going to create a black and white filter, which will come in really handy later as we start pre-grading it. For now we'll turn that off. Just quickly I'll show you how you can drag and drop groups inside of each other, so you can have a group inside of a group, really useful with bigger projects that have a lot of layers. So let's start off with the retouching. We're going to go over and select the healing brush. We're going to change our size around slightly. We want to start off by just working on the skin. Obviously we've got quite a wide shot here, so our brush is going to have to be quite small. We're just going to start by selecting a few of the blemishes on the face, but we want to make sure that we're working on our blank RT1 layer inside of our group called RT. That means that the changes we make are on a blank layer, which means we can go in and erase them as we work. Say we make a mistake that we only realise an hour after starting working, we can quickly go in with the eraser brush and just paint out the mistake that we've made. This is fundamentally what non-destructive workflow is. It gives you the ability to work backwards no matter how far you are in the process of retouching. Now let's change our tool over to the stamp clone tool. As you can see, we're going to change our size around and make sure our flow's at 100%. And this is where the touch shortcut comes in handy. We're going to click on our touch shortcut, just the primary touch, so clicking in the center, and that will allow us to select our source. We're going to start painting out a few of the creases in the jeans. Again, working on the blank RT1 layer. Again, just clicking on the touch shortcut to make a selection of the zone that we want to select, and we're going to zoom in and we're going to start working on those creases. It's important to go slowly at this stage, working with a smaller brush, taking your time, because the quicker you go, the more work you're going to have to do later to make it look more real. I will often work with multiple layers inside of our RT group, which allows me to work backwards in different stages. So here we're working on some creases on the jeans. I'm going to create a new blank layer and make a selection around the area of the jeans that we want to smoothen out. I'm then going to take the clone stamp tool and make a selection outside of our area and start painting in to replace where the jeans were slightly outside of the nice smooth line that we've drawn. Again, working on this blank layer 1 inside of our RT group, which will later merge onto RT1. I'll then invert the selection right at the bottom of the screen there by clicking invert. This will then allow me to start painting inside of the jeans using the stamp clone tool. I'll speed this bit up as it is quite a slow process, and we'll skip straight onto the part where I'm taking a big section of the jeans and I'm duplicating. So here I've created another blank layer and I've used the stamp clone tool to make a big selection of the jeans. I'm then going to use the move tool to move that selection into the place I want it to apply to. In this case, we're just going to try and hide some of the creases slightly with this. So I'm going to drag it into place and rotate slightly. I'm then going to create a mask onto this layer where I'm going to paint away the area that we don't want it impacting too much on. And then I'm going to create a clipped adjustment layer. I'm going to use the levels adjustment, which will allow me to change the brightness and the contrast of this area. Make it fit in terms of luminance. We don't have to worry too much about the color right now. And just make sure it looks relatively natural. Once I'm happy with that, I can flatten the mask, which means that I'm applying it to the layer. One of the really helpful touch shortcuts is when you use the primary touch on the touch shortcut, it allows you to then select multiple layers at the same time. So if I hold down that touch shortcut, I can then click on my two layers and then I can go and merge them. I can then take the eraser brush and just start painting into the area. where I don't want it to apply too heavily to. Next, we're going to be looking at dodge and burn. This is one of the most important tools as a retoucher. It allows you to influence the amount of luminance hitting the subject in both your dark areas and your light areas. This is why we've split our dodge and burn onto a low and high layer. Your low is going to be changing all of your shadows and your dark areas, and your high layer is going to be doing the same thing in your highlights. How do we use this tool? Well, we're going to grab a brush tool. Our opacity is turned all the way down. We're then going to select our mask and start painting onto it. You'll notice that as you start to paint, you're effectively painting brightness back into that area. This is great for removing creases in clothing. For example, in this image, we're going to use it to remove the creases in the jeans. We're going to paint in the darker areas with our high, and then select our low to paint into the lighter areas. Here we're going to use the dodge and burn layers to change the facial structure of our model. We're going to take our low layer and just paint below the cheekbones slightly. This will give our model the appearance of having slightly higher cheekbones, which is a quality that people often associate with people being more attractive. It's important to be careful how you use these tools, as often your subject probably won't need these changes. Here I'm just using it as an example. On the actual image, I probably wouldn't push this too far, as our model doesn't really need it. You can also use dodge and burn to brighten up areas of the skin. Here we're going to use it on the nose and the eyes just to make them come out of those shadows slightly more. One big thing that you'll notice is that we only have a catch light in one of the eyes. So how are we going to remedy this? Well, we're going to create a new adjustment layer. It's going to be a levels adjustment, and we're going to invert the mask on it. We're then going to take our lasso tool and make a really small selection around where the catch light is supposed to be. We can then select our mask on our levels adjustment layer that we've just created, and take the paintbrush tool and paint it in white. Another way to do this is just by clicking invert down at the bottom. As you can see here, we can then go into our levels properties and start playing around with our output levels, which will allow us to change the brightness of our selection. We can then hop back over to our dodge and burn and continue to remove blemishes and nasty shadows around our model's face. This tool is really important. It is my favourite method when retouching. It is something I use on almost every photo, whether that is a portrait, in fashion. I even use it on some of my product photography. What's great is that you can always work backwards. Say you've gone over an area that you think is now too harsh. You can just invert your brush and start using a black brush to start painting over the area that you want to revert. This method does take a bit of practice. The single most important thing is to work with a brush with a low opacity. This will allow you to really master this tool. By showing you just the mask, you can start to see the changes that we've made. What's also great is the ability to hop into your mask. Say there is a big area where you're not too happy with, you can make a selection around that area and fill it in. I'm going to quickly fast forward on this retouching, just so that we don't drag out this video for too long. With the dodge and burn tool, as I said, it's important to just practice, and you can start to see that big difference that dodge and burn has had. As I flick on that group, you can start to see that not only have we changed the model's facial structure, but also the background and removed creases in the jeans. Next, we're going to quickly look at a pre-grade. This is a really cool tool. With that black and white adjustment layer that we created, we're going to change our blend mode to soft light. This means that our color sliders will start adjusting the luminance in the colors rather than just making our image black and white. You can start to really make your image pop and give it some beautiful dark contrast. Thanks for watching this part. In the next part, we're going to be looking at replacing part of the background using the selection tool and using the stamp clone tool.